We shall now talk about two more secondary storage devices. One is the magnetic tape and the other is the floppy disk in this particular mini session. Magnetic tape is a secondary storage which is basically used for keeping backups of data. So you can think of it like this. So this is a roll where the magnetic tapes are rolled. So if you see here, it's all rolled this side is empty. So these are all magnetic storage boxes or magnetic tape storage boxes. So if you have seen your thin silo tape, the tape which you use to stick, okay, you can think of it as a tape like that, which is made of plastic. It is coated with magnetic oxide. So the thin strip of plastic is coated with magnetic oxide. Thereby, you can record information on that magnetic oxide. Each character, whether it's A, number 1, B, X, Y, C, D, are all recorded using 7 or 9 bits. And there is one bit which is used for parity. I'll just tell you a little bit about parity. Whenever you're reading or writing data onto any device, there is a chance of error happening because 1 can easily become 0, 0 can easily become 1. So in order to correct or find out some kind of errors, you have something called as a technique of parity. So one bit is used for parity. Just to keep it in a very simple term, suppose I was writing in 9 bits and all the 9 bits were ones, so that one bit also, this one bit for parity would also be 1. Suppose in place of, although this parity says 1, but if there are even number of ones in the data, that means there was some mistake reading or writing the data. So parity is used to determine if there is any error in recording or reading the data. Now on a magnetic tape, if you see, this is a roller. So the inside side of the roller you can't read. Only on the top of the magnetic tape you can read and write using the read write. Now sequential access in the sense, suppose I have to read data which is stored at the end of the magnetic tape. I have to keep skipping or reading every data, checking whether it is the data I require, and only when I come to the end, then I'll know that it is my data. So that is known as a sequential data access. Sequential means I have to read every item. Let us think like this. Think of it. I have a box. I have kept in that box 50 chits, all random names. If you have to find one name, what you have to do, you have to open the book, open each chit and see whether it is that name. So that is sequential access. But now suppose I become a little smart. I create 26 boxes. All A names will be in box A, B names will be in box B, C names will be in box C, D names will be in box D. So if I say find the name Dharmendra, you will not go to box A, B, C, you will directly go to box D, and within that you will try to search whether Dharmendra exists. So that you can think of as semi-random. This, the mixed box, you can think of as sequential data access. Now data is stored as frames across the width. That is, this is one frame, second frame, third frame, fourth frame. Similarly, this is another frame. So this you can think of as block of data. This is a block, this is a block, and these are all individual frames. Okay, frames are organized into blocks or records. Okay, this block is also known as a record, and there's a small gap separating each of these frames and blocks. As I told you, magnetic tape is primarily used for taking data backups. Why? Because it is cheap. The data backup lasts 50 to hundreds of years. Really nothing happens to them. And it is cost effective. Because of that, magnetic tapes in very large organizations are intended to take backups. Why do you take backup? Because data could be lost due to hard disk crashing, hard disk getting damaged, and so on. So you usually have to have backups so that you can use it later on. Now what I shall do is, I shall now talk about a device to store data which is no longer used. You will almost never certainly see this particular thing in any modern machine. This is called as a floppy disk. Floppy disk was very popular, or in fact was the only kind of secondary storage available when I was studying engineering. This is about 25-30 years back. So you're fortunate you don't have to use the floppy disk because there were a lot of challenges and problems using this floppy disk. So I'll try to explain this floppy disk by going at one part at the other. So what happens with the floppy disk is, this is the cover of the floppy disk. Okay. So this is slides. So you can see this is sliding. So in this area, top and bottom, The read write head is used to read from this area. Again, it consists of a plastic material which has got tracks and sectors. You cannot see the tracks and sectors. Okay, this is just for your understanding. It's been shown here. When you open the floppy disk, you cannot see the tracks and sectors. Now what happens is this blue fellow is a hard plastic case. This is a metallic window which keeps moving up and down. So as the minute this floppy is put into the drive, this will slide across this side and you are able to read and write using the floppy drive. And this plastic here, the black one, it's divided into tracks and sectors. So on both sides of the floppy disk, you have data which is recorded. So let's try to understand. So it's a thin plastic disc which is coated with magnetic oxide. Now it is a semi-rigid, this blue fellow is a semi-rigid protective jacket, so that because this is plastic, it will easily get damaged, so this jacket protects it from it. There were different sizes of floppy disks. The common ones we used to use were 5 and 2.5 and 3.5 inch. 8 inches I myself have never used it. That is the size of this particular disk. This is an example of a 3.5 inch floppy disk. A 3.5 inch floppy disk, which was princely at that time, could just store 1.44 MB of data. The advantage of floppy disk is they were cheap but had extremely low capacity and very slow. But in order to read and write from this floppy disk, you had to have a floppy drive just as you have a CD drive or a DVD drive. So let's look at all the different parts of the floppy disk. So this hole here is used to indicate the capacity. If the hole is present, it indicates a 3.5 inch, which indicates a high capacity floppy disk. Number 2 is the hub. Now what hub does is it holds the center of the floppy disk so that the plastic can rotate like this. So the plastic can rotate. So by holding it like this, the plastic is able to rotate around like this and the floppy drive can read data from this particular floppy disk. Now shutter. Shutter is what? This particular fellow. When it's not into the read write, floppy is not inserted into the floppy drive, this particular fellow closes. Once we insert into the floppy drive, then this particular fellow opens. So this is the shutter. This metallic portion is the shutter. You can see it's off here, it is open here, so the read and write is happening in this black area. Now this blue fellow is your external plastic housing to protect it from any kind of a damage. Now below the blue and between the plastic, there is a thin polyester sheet. The reason you have this polyester sheet below this blue plastic is because as the plastic is rotating at a high speed, if the plastic will come in friction with this blue fellow and it will get destroyed. Because of this polyester or thin sheet, the disc does not get damaged while rotating. All right. So that is this fellow is known as the, as it rotates, this fellow protects it from the damage. Now if you look at it here, number 6 is this black fellow here. It is the magnetically coated plastic material. Okay, and you can see there are a number of tracks and these sectors. These are only for your understanding, and tracks and sectors are not visible on the actual hard disk. Now here one thing has not been labeled. You can see a black dot here. Okay, here it is. You can see a black dot here, this fellow here. So this is known as, this and this is known as the write protect. So if you push this up, you can only read from the floppy disk, you cannot write onto the floppy disk. If this is down, you can do both read and write. We used to use it extensively so that our floppy does not get damaged due to writing.